All right, hello, this is Matt Ludden, and I'm here with Joe Opelt. We're here today kind of to talk about some tricks in Tableau, and the goal really is to have a starting point or a reference point where people can come in and take a look at this video and get some ideas for what they can do in terms of the goal that we are working with today, which is to swap floating sheets and pop out in and out filters or parameters based on our sheet selection. So we're going to have a couple sheets. We're going to be able to swap them out, and depending on which sheet is selected, we can conditionally show a filter or not show a filter or show any object really. But in this case, we're going to be talking about legends and quick filters mostly. Real quick before we get started, I want to mention briefly that we have a whole lot of other resources for learning about some of these things. One that I think we should mention is Vil, at least that's how I've said his name, on the Tableau forums, has a whole lot of information on different tricks and tips for this kind of activity or this kind of operation in Tableau. He's got some Tableau workbooks that he's put out there for people to study. Tableau has a sheet selector that's a little bit different than what we're talking about today, method that they've posted, and I'd like to mention too that Joshua Milligan has put out a blog post that talks about swapping out sheets with different options like using a parameter or an action or a quick filter, and based on the selection, swapping out sheets. So with that, I believe I've got what I need to have an intro, and I'm going to let Joe take over from here.
Okay. For demonstration purposes, I have two similar sheets. One is green, one is blue, so we can tell them apart easily. This is Superstore data, so you can follow along on your own with this. What I've done is I've put a color legend just for each one so that we can swap those in and out later. I have a common filter for department, so if I change the department, it reflects in both. Very simple stuff. What I'm going to do is create a dashboard and start us swapping sheets. I start with a floating container. I'm going to use a vertical floating container. You can size this however you want. Just for demonstration purposes, I think I'll just make it that big. Let's just do that because it is. I'm going to start by throwing the sales form in here, sales sheet in there, and right below it the department sheet, the profit sheet, sales and profit. I'm going to hide the titles. And the reason being is when we have the titles in there, if there is no data, the titles will still show. But we want these sheets to be just one sheet and only one sheet, depending on what gets chosen later. So I'm going to hide these titles. The user can put a title up top with a parameter or whatever we want to use. Right now, these are side by side, but or one on top of the other, but we're going to swap them out. I'm going to go back to the forms here, to the sheet, and I have created a measure, which I'm going to display here, a parameter called measure. One is sales, one is profit. That's what we're going to use to select which sheet to display. There's many, many methods for determining what should be displayed on a dashboard. It may be by user. We have functions that we can do in calc fields to tell who the user is, what group they're in. You may want to display based on what day of the week it is. There's all kind of things. In the end, basically, we want to have a filter that tells this sheet to display itself or not. I created a calc field called report to display. It is simply based on the measure, on the parameter that I created. We're going to put that up here. And I am going to make a custom value list. I only want this to display when the measure is sales. And so now you'll see if I change the measure to profit, the sheet goes away. Okay, sales profit. I'm going to do the same thing in the profit sheet. Yeah, that didn't work.
And the wrong field there.
Yep, misgrabbed. Again, custom value list, profit, plus, and so this will only display when profit is there. Yep, let's also display.
Just kind of limiting the values there on each sheet. It can
Yep.
be matched with the parameter.
Now, having done that, let's go over to the dashboard again. Let us display our parameter. Now, based on what we choose here, only one or the other will display. And that's cool.
Yep.
I'm going to float this. I just click the little float box down here. When I click on an object in a dashboard, I can control it down in this corner. And I'm just going to float that and get it out of here so that I can have space for it. Now, we want to also, you notice that there's both legends have shown up here when I put the sheets onto the dashboard. Both legends are there, but I really only want the profit legend to show when profit is selected. I only want the sales legend to show when sales is selected. So what I'm going to do is create, I'm going to create a new worksheet. It doesn't really matter what is on this worksheet, but I made a calc field that's just called A. It's just something to put out there. I am going to put A here on the rows. I am going to drag it down and make it big enough. I want this to be bigger than the size of my object that I want to hide, and you'll see why later. So I just made it that big. We're going to call this the sales legend pop, because we are going to pop that sales legend in and out. I am going to put report to display on here again, and even though that said sales in here, I'm going to actually do custom again. I never want that to change. I am going to make that sales in here, and only sales will ever work there. So when it's sales, this will display. When it's not sales, this will disappear. I'm going to duplicate this.
Can you briefly explain again why you're creating these sheets and what
this
is going to be on the dashboard?
Yeah, this sheet will push the sales legend to be displayable when this expands to its full size. This size that's on, when it expands to this size, it'll push the legend down, and it'll be hidden behind something. You'll see how we do that later.
So it's going to be similar to what you've done with the sheets in terms of
correct.
Based on the filtering, we're going to be swapping them out conditionally. These are just objects that are going to be able to push the legends down for each of those selections, profit and sales.
And so I'm going to do the same thing for profits. I'm going to change the filter here. Take this guy out of here and make this one profit.
Right. That showed up there because you duplicated the sheet.
I duplicated the sheet, and that's why that was there. Correct. Now, because sales is still the value that's selected for the measure elsewhere, even though it's not displayed here, since sales is this doesn't display. Let's go put this over on our dashboard, which moved on me because I wasn't careful. I'm going to create two more vertical floating
containers. Yeah.
Containers. I'm going to put my sales. I'm going to put my sales legend pop in one of them. I'm going to float my sales legend and put that in there as well. Let me remove the header here. I'm going to put the profit legend pop into the other container. Float the profit legend and put that down in here. Okay, this is an example. If you recall, because sales is here, the profit sheet does not display, but the header does. That's why we take these headers out, the titles rather. So now, as we change profit, you'll see that these will pop up and down. And if we get creative with where we position these things, they will seem to look like one replaces the other. So I just put it in some size. It is that size, the container. I'm going to write down actually the numbers that are down here just because I'm going to use them later. 757, 209. It doesn't really matter what the sizes are, just as long as you make them both the same size, and you'll see how that works.
And that's the size of the vertical container that is currently selected.
I'm going to make this other vertical container use those same numbers. The top two numbers are the positions. You'll see that as I move forward, it moves this thing around, and these will end up being on top of each other. 244. All right. So now let's just to see how that looks. Okay, one replaces the other as we swap these two things out. All right. So then we got this garbage stuff at the top. We don't want to see that. We can hide that with a text container. I'm going to put one more text container on here. There's nothing going to be in it. I want to position this so that it will be hiding what's there. Now it is clear right now. You can see through it, but we are going to edit this thing, format this so that its color now will become an opaque white, which is the color of the background of the rest of the thing. And boom, it hides everything. You'll never see that again, no matter where you go. As we change this, then they just seem to replace each other. Pretty nice. We can have any kind of object here. I just used a legend. We can have images, filters, forms, whole sheets. Just have to make it big enough to do it. But that's how you can make it look like that. For demonstration purposes, let's assume that the user only wants this filter to work when profits is being displayed. I'm going to make this one floating. I'm going to duplicate this profit legend pop one more time. Duplicate sheet, and this time we're going to call it the profit filter pop. What did I do?
I'm not sure.
I think I deleted it. Rename. I sure did. Delete is right above it.
You could go back, Joe, if you wanted.
Oh, that's right. I could have hit the back key. Yeah, profit filter pop. So we're going to use this now, one more container over on our dashboard. I'm going to create one more container here. I'm going to drag the profit filter pop in here. I'm going to drag the part. Did I make that floating? I did. I'm dragging it.
Now,
Okay.
once they're in a container, Joe, they're no longer floating, right? You can
That's correct. They are pegged into that container,
right.
and the container itself is still floating. Let's hide this here. And so now, let's just say. So again, it only shows up when profit. Oh, okay. Because nothing is hiding behind it. Because it's not hiding behind anything yet. You still see it. We only want it to be visible when the user says.
Pushing it off the dashboard here.
Yes. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to do something pretty unique. I'm going to change the Y position of this thing to be a negative number, so that the top of this container is actually going to be off the dashboard. Tableau will let me do that.
Can't pull it off, right?
I can't pull it. I cannot drag it there, but I can most certainly put it there. I'm going to move this over a little bit, 50, whatever. Okay, so now when sales is selected, it's gone way up. The pop disappears because sales doesn't. Profit is what makes it show, what makes it display. It's sitting way up high above the actual dashboard boundary, but it's still there. It's still on the dashboard, just not visible.
Right. And you could actually show that in each of the sheets that you've created, the sales by order date and sales legend pops. You could see the value that is selected by the parameter measure, and it's going to tell you right there in the sheet which one's been selected. So there's ways to visually see what's happening. It all makes sense. There's logic behind it.
So what we've done is we've done two different methods of swapping. Well, one method we call swapping, colloquially, where we're swapping the sales and profits sheets. And we are popping the legends and filters.
Right.
That right here, that container is still here. But
Sure.
when we have sales selected, the filter is actually in a negative space, and so it does not display. But still, it works. You know, while it's here, we can select things and change it, and then it works for both still, and just the way we expected it.
Right.
And so that, in a nutshell.
The whole, dashboard being white was important in this example. We had to color the text object that covered up the sales legend and the profit legend, and that first example you showed to match the background sheet of the.
That's correct.
Of the
if you have a background color for the whole dashboard, then you'll want to just select that color for the shading to hide things.
White makes it much more simple for us.
Then we just use the white thing. Something to point out. In this example here, let's look at the vertical container. There's a little teeny space here. This is the non-displayed sales sheet. It does take up a tiny little bit of real estate. If we're going to be swapping a dozen sheets, each one will take a little teeny piece of real estate, and the subsequent ones below will have to get pushed down in the container that they're all the floating container that they're all contained in. Sometimes that gets to be cumbersome. You run out of real estate in the bottom. I mean, I could expand this container. In this case, in this example, I have almost unlimited space. But in a very busy dashboard, you may find that to be a problem. In that case, you may be better off to pop the forms one behind each other. But at least you have these examples now. You have the technique here, and use it whichever is the most advantageous for what you need to do.
Use it at your own will, at your own discretion.
Yeah.
The other thing that we kind of discussed before we started the recording here is, the rendering of the swapping or the popping.
Yeah.
If you happen to have a really busy dashboard, that may become more cumbersome than you like or whatever. So this is just one technique, one trick that, or it's actually two tricks, the swapping within a container and then the popping that's happening with the legend and the quick filter. We're just trying to expose people to different workarounds and tricks depending on what their end goal is for their dashboards. This example of measures and profits didn't really matter. It was just an example to show the technique. You might want to show profit and measure in one sheet together, but depending on what your end goal actually is, this is one technique that will give you the options to do some of the things that Joe showed, and I'm really thankful that Joe's taken the time to show me and to teach me a little bit about what he's doing here. And I think Joe is doing a lot of great things, and we're really glad to have him in the Tableau Forums community. And Joe, if you want to give your thank yous or any final words you want to end on.
You mentioned Ville before, and I learned a lot of this stuff from him. I really want to give a call out to him.
Switch screens here real quick and
okay.
Go back to his profile. There's lots of different threads that he's participated in, and he posts a lot of workbooks, and then he has posted a lot of images with text to describe what he's done. He also has this one example of a drill down alternative in the Tableau workbook library. He may have others, I'm not sure. And the basic sheet swapping technique, there's an example of that on the Tableau KB articles. And in this example, it's actually not a floating container. It's, I think, a tiled container. But again, your mileage depends on your end goal and what you're trying to accomplish. And again, as I said before, Joshua Milligan has a really cool blog post that gives you several different approaches to swapping sheets and swapping different things, showing a no data message when a view is empty. And I really appreciate his blog posts and other blog posts by a lot of the users in the community that give us several different examples of techniques that they're using in their own work. And like I said, very thankful for Joe here today, spending his time with us, showing us something that he's using a lot in his own work. Is there anything else you'd like to show or discuss, Joe?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you again, and we'll see you next time.